topic.
Yeah.
I've read in the book Sapiens, I don't know if you read it, by Yuval Harari. It's a very popular book, Brief History of Mankind. And there's this theory about that, when man controlled fire 1,000,000 years ago and started cooking the food, so this theory said that this is how our brain got bigger and our gut got shorter.
Right.
And man didn't have to chew his food for 6 hours, and this is what helped us evolve. So I want your thoughts on that. On this. It's a theory, right?
Right.
Which means cooking had a very positive impact on our evolution.
I'm familiar with the theory. How did we, without having evolved our brains, how do we figure out that cooking was going to be helpful to us? Why? How do we start doing that? I mean, I don't. We know about cooking is that cooking destroys nutrients and creates toxins and poisons the body. And I don't know anyone who can honestly say, if they got their body clean especially, right? I got my body clean, I ate raw food, it didn't work for me, I feel better eating cooked food. All the people I know who went back to eating cooked food all say the same thing. I felt much better when I was all raw. But it was too hard, I couldn't do it. Whatever their excuses are. And excuse me, but those are excuses. I mean, you do whatever you choose to do. You want to be all raw, you can be all raw. Okay? You don't want to be all raw, you don't have to be all raw. You don't have to make excuses. But every one of those people that's honest has said, yeah, I felt much better raw. So I have trouble believing that this in any way positively impacted our brain. I don't think so. And certainly not, another theory is it was eating animal products that made us more intelligent. Well, if that's the case, how come dogs and cats aren't much smarter? They've been doing it much longer than we have. They should be much smarter than we are. I mean, why aren't they? How come they haven't developed, right? There's still pretty rudimentary intelligence, I think.
So you think the theory is wrong, basically?
I think the theory is nonsense.
It's nonsense. It's not what made our brain bigger and...
I don't think it had anything to do with it. I have an alternative theory that I would suggest is that we wound up living in inhospitable climates, right? And whether this is because of climate change, it could have been that we're lounging by the lagoon under the palm trees, eating our mangoes one day, and the next day it started snowing, and people were like, shit, what's this? This sucks, right? And so, people started exploring, going to other, and we know, scientists say they know how we wound up in all the places we wound up.
And I read that they started in East Africa, so I'm not sure how many mangoes there are out there. I don't know.
Plenty.
Plenty?
Yeah, talk to Peter.
Right.
We spent a lot of time in Africa. We started in equatorial Africa, tropical Africa. They're mangoes. Mangoes are the most popular fruit on the planet. So they're all the way around the planet in tropical regions. But whatever they were eating. The point is, man eventually wound up, either they moved to places and then realized there was cold there, or the climate changed. And they wound up, for the first time, having to face inhospitable climate. I mean, if we'd always grown up here, we wouldn't have to work much more than most other species do. Every species has to work for a living, right? Some species, birds make nests. Why do they make nests? What's the point of a nest?
To live.
For the offspring?
Yeah, the nest is to protect the infants until they're big enough to fly off on their own. The mature birds don't nest. The nest is to lay the eggs in, have a place to guard the eggs until they're hatched and they're big enough to be on their own. Birds don't need houses otherwise. Okay, if we lived here, it would be nice to have a way to get out of the rain, but maybe you could find a little cave, or maybe build a very simple roof structure. How much do we really need to live in a climate where it's never cold, right? And by the way, if it's too cold here for you, you could go down a little bit, and it's warmer. there's a direct correlation between elevation and temperature. Temperature drops 3 degrees every 1,000 feet Fahrenheit, 3 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1,000 feet.
Yeah, but there's massive rain here, during the rainy season. So
Yep.
you need a place.
Well, you don't. You could get wet. I mean, if it's not cold, the rain isn't that much of a problem. But there, you can certainly find a way to protect yourself from the rain. We're smart enough to do that. That's no problem. But the point is, we wouldn't have to do much else, right? I mean, you know, people work hard because they've got car payments and house payments, and they've got to buy furniture, and they've got to pay the utilities. But what if you just lived in nature? You built yourself a little structure so you could stay dry, and how much furniture do you need? Right? You don't have to buy anything. More than 50% of the trees here make some kind of fruit. A lot of it's not things we'd be excited about, but if you're hungry, you'd probably eat a lot of it, right? If that's all there was. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to find food living in the tropics. So my theory is that we wound up in other less hospitable climates, and one of two things happened, okay? The people that weren't clever enough to figure out how to survive didn't, and they didn't reproduce, okay? And the people who did survive reproduced, and so their offspring was a little more clever than the previous ones. And then they, that's what happened. Okay, we wound up needing to become more intelligent to survive in climates that weren't really hospitable to us. I think that's what happened. I don't think it had anything to do with cooking food.
Yeah.
It wasn't just go pick the mango up off the ground and eat it. It's like now I've got to figure out what to eat and how to get that food. And maybe in some places, I mean, if you wound up, how people wound up living in places like Alaska, northern Canada, and northern Russia. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if maybe, people were always curious. And so I can imagine somebody setting out on foot from the tropics in December, whatever. And as they move further and further north, it gets warmer and warmer because it's getting, and they make it all the way up there. And it's August, and they think this is beautiful, and there's no one here. It's not crowded, and there's fruit in Canada in August. There's cherries and apples and other things. And let's stay here. This is nice. And then it starts to get cold, and they've never seen cold weather in their life. They've never experienced that, so they don't think, oh, maybe it's because we went in this direction. They would think the world's getting cold. What is this, right? They wouldn't have thought, maybe we should go back where we came from. Maybe they just stay there and figured out. I mean, why would anyone go up there and say, this would be a nice place? Imagine winding up in Alaska for the first time in February, and there's 6 feet of snow, and you're coming from the tropics, and there's nothing growing anywhere, and you're thinking, this would be a nice place to live. Like, how did people wind up there? But I don't know, but they did. They wound up living in places where there's no food growing most of the year.
I don't think they got there in one day. It took them.
I'm guessing it was at least 2 days. Yeah, they wound up having to kill animals. They wound up having to get smart enough to go do what they didn't need to do before. When people say we're hunter-gatherers, a lot of scientists say, well, not so much. If anything, gatherer-hunter would be a better way to describe it. Because how successful would we have been at hunting, right? The evidence shows, there's been several studies on the teeth of every known hominid that's been found, shows they were fruit eaters, all of them, okay? Look at our digestive tract. It's still almost identical to our closest primate relatives. It hasn't evolved to allow us to handle heavy protein diets like omnivores and carnivores systems are set up. Our system still looks like a system of a frugivore. So there hasn't been any significant evolution. And when we eat heavy protein diets, we wind up with high rates of cancer and heart disease, and digestive tract diseases, and circulatory system problems like plaque, arterial plaque. So I don't believe that, as many people say, that this is what happened. I think what happened is they were forced to eat these diets because there was nothing else available to them. Right, so they did the best they could, but it required becoming more creative, more clever. There was no way they were going to survive otherwise.
So if we're in one of the areas, parts of the world where there is like tons of fruit, so how comes for the last 500 years the main staples of the people's diet here has been rice and beans, and not maybe fruit as well, but like half of their diet maybe have been made up of rice and beans?
My guess why is because people here are still influenced by what other people do, right? So Costa Rica, one of the criticisms that people make about Costa Rica is it's too Americanized, okay? Because, you know, we're close to the US here, and there are a lot of people here from North America, and people come from North America, and a lot of local people think, oh, well, these people are wealthier, and they must know more than we do. And so they imitate us. So, you know, it could have been that from an early time, that same thing was happening. People came here on these ships, you know, and the natives were going, oh, look, these people are more advanced than we are. We should do what they do. I don't know.
So who actually bred the white rice grain and the pinto bean? Like maybe that got brown here maybe 500, I don't know.
Well, you're making an assumption. I have no idea when it was. Maybe it was longer than that. I have no idea. But it's been here for a while. It's been the staple of the diet here for a long time. I mean, it's kind of funny when you consider the fact that, you know, here in this area, this is different in cities. People can't grow their own food very easily, but here, everybody here can plant bananas and papayas, and you know, most people have space for at least a mango tree, an avocado. You know, they could plant 4 or 5 trees, and a bunch of the smaller things like bananas and avocados, bananas and papayas, which are both grasses, don't take up much space and fruit quickly, and they could support themselves. And yet they live on food that they have to buy. How many people here do you think are producing rice and beans in their backyard? Most people are going to town and buying sacks of these things every month or so. Now they're cheap, and the reason why rice and beans are staple foods around the world is because they're cheap and they keep for a long time. But you know, again, it could well be that all the more advanced Europeans came here from, you know, other places, and that influenced the locals away from whatever their traditional diet was. Certainly, rice and beans would not have been the original traditional diet here for the natives, but it's become the diet for everyone. People here eat rice and beans at every meal. It's not all they eat, but there are pretty much rice and beans with almost every meal. I mean, that, again, that's changing. Unfortunately, diet's becoming worse than that, not better than that.
Meat.
More meat now, more animal products. You know, 2 years ago, there was a fast food restaurant that opened in Ohancha for the first time. Anyway, yeah, that's my guess as to what happened, how it's become what it's become. And so people here, like people, I mean, you know, they could have, maybe people said to them, you can't live on fruit, because that's what they believed. And so people here believe, I don't know. But it's kind of crazy, isn't it? Pretty much everyone here could support themselves without ever paying for food, and yet I don't know anyone who does that.
You can't survive on fruit. You can't not eat for 3 weeks. You can't. Yeah, I get you now.
Right. You know, in fact, I mean, there are people who would suggest that as humans, we're all connected, you know, in such a way that when something becomes part of human consciousness, it affects everyone. Even if they never directly encounter that themselves, they're still affected because it's now part of human consciousness. So, I don't know. I wonder if young children here, or people your age now, It's a little different because they were probably behind in terms of having access to the technology. But you know how, like I remember when computer games first became, I remember the first computer game. I was an adolescent at the time. It was called Pong. Anyone know it? You have a knob that moves a paddle and a ball. It's ping pong.
I had it.
That was it. That was the first
like
game.
7
And as soon as these technological things happened, like the young kids sort of instantly understood it. How is that? How does a kid born today just pick up a phone and know what to do with it? I still know what to do with mine. Any 12-year-old could show me, who's never owned a phone, could easily show me how to use it. Because there's something in the consciousness. Okay, and maybe, you know, I guess once we're already here, it's not the same. Like we're not born with it. And they seem to be born with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know how it works,
I look
but
at my kids, it's just like
it's crazy, isn't it?
crazy. And I'm good with software and computer.
Right.
They're really good.
It's amazing.